This is a lesson on how to write a philosophical position paper, a quick guide with helpful tips. Hi, my name is Chad, and in this lesson I will teach you the genre, form, and style of philosophical position papers, as well as a few tips for critical analysis and argumentation. Before we discuss how to write a philosophical position paper, let's first make sure we understand its genre and expected features. In its most basic form, a philosophical position paper is similar both in form and features to an academic research essay, with an introduction, counterarguments, core argument, and conclusion. However, as a distinct genre of academic writing, the philosophical position paper places a unique emphasis on evaluating reasoning. What distinguishes the paper is its content, mode of analysis, and expectation that a writer will not only refute alternate perspectives on a conceptual level, but also anticipate and diffuse objections to the writer's position. The content of a philosophical position paper is necessarily limited to topics native to philosophical categories, like epistemology or metaphysics, addressing specific issues that intersect with the big questions philosophers commonly ask. How do we know? What is truth? Why do we exist? The mode of analysis common to this kind of paper requires one to engage an issue on the ideological or conceptual level, assessing perspectives based on their logic or plausibility by analyzing the inferences, warrants, and implications of those perspectives. The refutation and objections necessitate that the writer not only analyze the inferences, warrants, and implications of other perspectives, but also offer logical argumentation against opposing views and a defense of the writer's position through logical premises, anticipating and diffusing potential objections to the position. If your assignment requires you to defend your position against other competing positions on an issue, consider using the generic outline on the right to structure your philosophical position paper. Near the end of this video, we will discuss another assignment type that commonly requires a philosophical position paper and note the differences in form. Now that you have a good idea of the genre of a philosophical position paper, let's move on to understanding the form and content. The first section of a philosophical position paper is the introduction. To write an effective introduction, be sure to do the following. Craft a prelude that engages readers with the importance or intrigue of the topic, establishing the exigence of your paper. One of my favorite ways of doing this is by choosing an incisive epigraph or an anecdote that suggests the gravity of the problem. Pose the research question that motivates your writing and that clarifies the question your thesis, reasons, and evidence are trying to answer. Avoid making your research question too broad. How do we know would be too broad for a position paper of this kind. Look for the more narrow topic and question you might reasonably answer in one focused position paper. Connect your topic to a broader research problem, one of the big questions, an issue or question on which the scholars disagree. Remember, questions like, how do we know? What is truth? Why do we exist? By mentioning that your topic or question intersects with the bigger questions in the field, you will help motivate readers by demonstrating the significance of your topic. Craft a brief literature review that surveys how scholars have understood the question and issue. This need only be a few sentences in the introduction because the counterargument section will expand on these sentences to describe and refute opposing positions. Narrow your introduction down to your thesis, and in your thesis clearly and concisely argue your position as the answer to the research question and as a partial solution to the broader problem. Articulate an advanced organizer, which succinctly maps out your approach to the question or the lines of reasoning you will use to refute your opponents and argue your position. The next section is the counterargument section, also known as the refutation or opposing position section. For each opposing position, survey and evaluate the best counterarguments for the position, offering a refutation and critique of the reasoning undergirding the position. First, identify the positions, supplying each with a name or fitting each within a pre-existing category. Second, name representative scholars from each position and explain their connection to the topic and with one another. Third, quote from and summarize the scholars, letting your opponents have the opportunity to articulate their argument for themselves because, in all likelihood, they are more proficient at communicating their perspective than you are. Carving out space for other voices demonstrates intellectual fair-mindedness. Fourth, Assess and refute opposing positions based on their logic or plausibility by analyzing the inferences, warrants, and implications of those perspectives, offering logical argumentation against opposing positions. Look for fallacies or gaps in the logical progression of the argument. After surveying and evaluating counterarguments, transition to your core argument, that is, your position on the topic. Argue your position on the topic, your answer to the research question, by defending a logical set of premises and conclusions using research and situated evidence. First, pose a premise of your position and defend it with your original insights and with primary and secondary sources. Articulate your own reasoning to support your argument, using quotations judiciously. Introduce, quote, and cite primary source material. Provide commentary and analysis on each quotation, demonstrating how the quoted text is integral to your argument. Engage and synthesize scholarly secondary sources by similarly introducing, quoting, citing, and commenting on secondary sources drawn from the ongoing scholarly conversation about your topic. Look for recent and reliable scholarly sources as well as seminal historical sources in the field. Second, identify, explain, and defend inferences or assumptions that undergird your premises. To avoid fallacies or gaps in the logic of your argument, provide warrants for your assumptions in defense of your perspective. Demonstrate how your position is consistent within the broader network of beliefs that form your worldview or perspective. By doing this, you will show how your perspective is internally consistent and how your position on this topic fails to produce any problems that your perspective cannot resolve. After arguing your case for your position, you will need to anticipate and seek to disarm possible objections to your argument. First, identify the potential weaknesses in the position. Consider the lines of reasoning others might use to refute your position and supply a logical response. Recognize key areas of disagreement on the topic and further explain the reasoning for your position in these areas. Note any fallacies or inconsistencies in the objections to your position. Second, ultimately explain how the weaknesses can be resolved or how they do not compromise the integrity of the position. Once you have anticipated and diffused objections to your position, close your essay with a conclusion that recaps your argument and reiterates its significance. Like the conclusion of an academic research essay, begin the conclusion section by framing the essay with a modified return to the introduction. First, restate the thesis in different words. Second, explicitly address the research problem and demonstrate how your position on the narrower topic helps to supply a solution to the broader problem, one of the big questions in philosophy. Third, offer integrative implications and applications. Offer disciplinary or interdisciplinary implications which show how your position contributes to scholarly conversations on other related topics. And ministerial or ethical implications which show how your position could inform changes to readers' ministry practices or daily lifestyles. Fourth, return to the prelude and spin a conclusive or lingering twist on the prelude to frame the essay. Now that you have a good idea of the genre, as well as the form and content of philosophical position papers, let's move on to understanding the mode of analysis. The mode of analysis refers to the way writers assess other positions and argue in support of their own positions. In other words, mode of analysis refers to one's method or approach to interacting with arguments in the position paper. As a distinguishing mark of writing a position paper, the mode of analysis common to this kind of paper requires one to engage an issue on the ideological or conceptual level, assessing perspectives based on their logic or plausibility by analyzing the inferences, warrants, and implications of those perspectives. Do not merely write, "I agree" or "I disagree." Do not write sentences that discuss your preferences, such as "I like" or "I dislike." Do not hide behind other scholars to offer critiques of opposing positions. Due to a lack of confidence, a lack of adequate research, or lack of effort to refine their arguments, many writers simply parrot the critiques of other scholars and lose their own voice. Instead, writers should shift the focus of their paper from simply affirming the arguments of others to using those arguments to corroborate the critiques and arguments they have already articulated in the paper. Secondary sources are not prepackaged positions you can simply pick and affirm. They are supporting evidence for or confirmation of your well-reasoned argument. Although the term position paper may seem to suggest that this paper is merely an opinion paper, a philosophical position paper is only interested in your opinion when you defend your opinion with reasons and evidence in a logical, researched presentation. Use these categories from the Critical Thinking Foundation to assess opposing positions and defend your own position. Purpose. What is the purpose of their argument? What is the purpose of your argument? Question. What is the question at issue? Information. What evidence or warrants do they supply, or do you supply? Concepts. Do they explain key concepts? Do you explain key concepts in your argument? Assumptions. Do they acknowledge or account for the assumptions they take for granted? Do you? Inferences. Do they explain how they move from inferences to conclusions? Do you? Point of view. Do they demonstrate an awareness of their point of view or others' point of view? Do you? Implications. Do they acknowledge the consequences of their argument? Do you acknowledge yours? For more on evaluating reasoning, check out our video on critical thinking on our YouTube page. In the video, we will walk through the Critical Thinking Foundation's Guide to Critical Thinking and Analyzing Arguments. In addition to using the 8 categories from the Critical Thinking Foundation, seek to identify and label fallacies in the arguments others use to support their positions. Doing this will not only enable you to accurately pinpoint specific errors in their judgment and argumentation, but also supply you with the vocabulary and categories to provide an incisive critique. Also, seek to familiarize yourself with common rhetorical fallacies to avoid gaps in your own argumentation. What follows is a list of some of these common fallacies. Feel free to pause the video and peruse the common fallacies that follow. For more information on rhetorical appeals and fallacies, check out our video entitled The Rhetorical Triangle, which can be found on our YouTube page. Some of the fallacies of ethos which result in untrustworthiness and unreliability are ad hominem, moral equivalency, poisoning the well, false authority. A few of the fallacies of logos which result in inconsistency and irrationality are non sequitur, post hoc fallacy, begging the question, appeal to ignorance. Lastly, some of the fallacies of pathos that result in emotional coercion and callousness are bandwagon appeal, scare tactics, false analogy, appeal to pity. Now that you understand the mode of analysis for a philosophical position paper, as well as a few practical tips, let's consider a common variation on the basic form, the criticism paper. The generic form and content we have been discussing thus far represent the most basic form of the philosophical position paper, the issue-based paper, where your assignment is to critique opposing positions on an issue and defend your own position on that issue. However, writers must be able to adapt this form as necessary depending on the assignment. Another common variation of the philosophical position paper is the criticism paper. If your assignment requires you to analyze and critique one specific scholar's position on a topic before offering a response of your own, consider using the generic outline on the right. Note that this structure is nearly identical to that of the basic form. The only primary differences would be that the criticism paper focuses the literature review and counterargument section on just one position and may drop the objection section, depending on the nature of the assignment. In a criticism paper, the core argument often argues in contrast to the opposing scholar's position, drawing attention to the ways the writer's position resolves tensions and solves issues that the opposing position left unresolved. So, as we've seen, whether writing a position paper or a criticism paper, a writer of philosophy asserts a thesis, defends the thesis, supports the thesis, and applies the thesis, interacting with a more limited topic that addresses one of the big questions in philosophy. I hope you have found this quick lesson helpful as you seek to craft a philosophical position paper. For more information, check your writing manuals, visit local writing centers, or consult online writing helps. Or check out more videos at our YouTube channel. And visit Southeastern's Writing Center website where you'll find dozens of helpful links and handouts offering writing assistance for a variety of situations and audiences. Thank you.